Portable TV. Come watch with me. Tensions heating up once again between the U.S. and China, this time over supercomputers. 7 Chinese companies have been blacklisted for allegedly helping in Chinese military efforts. This as the U.S. is grappling with a shortage of semiconductor chips needed to build cars. RT's Farron Franzak has the story.
It's the first trade action against China by the Biden administration that will more than likely further escalate tensions between the U.S. and China. The U.S. Commerce Department announcing these 7 Chinese supercomputer developer companies are now on the export blacklist. This move now bans American companies from exporting technology to the groups without a license. So, why are they banned? In a statement made by the U.S. Commerce Department, quote, the 7 added to the entity list were involved with building supercomputers used by China's military actors, its destabilizing military modernization efforts, and or weapons of mass destruction programs.
The relevant personages on the U.S. side should abandon the Cold War game and zero-sum thinking.
Friday, China fired back at the move, saying the U.S. should treat China-U.S. relations objectively and rationally and do more things that are conducive to the healthy and stable development of China-U.S. relations.
Containment and suppression by the United States cannot stop the pace of China's scientific and technological progress, but will only strengthen China's determination and will to innovate independently.
And while China works to innovate independently, the move is starting to trickle down across the globe, where even the U.S. is starting to feel its effects.
We fully recognize that this is an issue that is impacting industries across the country, including the auto industry.
Auto companies, particularly General Motors and Ford, are caught up in a global shortage of semiconductors, where most come from China, including another Chinese company that was blacklisted last year. Auto factories are now shutting down because those chips are needed to get cars off the assembly line. Not enough chips, no cars to make.
Next week, there's going to be a meeting led by our NEC director and our national security advisor with a number of companies, get some private sector input on how to address this issue. So this is something that there is a great deal of focus on at the highest level across government.
Despite plant closures, a spokesperson for General Motors says the auto giant is increasingly confident, despite plant closures, it will hit its earnings target for the year.
Reporting for In Question in Washington, D.C., I'm Farron Franzak. All right, for more on the chip shortage and how we got here, we'll talk to investigative journalist, co-host of Boom Bust, Ben Swan is here. Ben, the auto industry is bracing for a $60 billion blow to sales in the first half of this year alone. How might the semiconductor chip shortage impact workers at the plant all the way down to the car salesman on the lot, especially at such a tough time during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's going to have a huge impact. First of all, we're talking about, as you said, a $60 billion impact. That translates into roughly 700,000 fewer cars even being made, let alone what's sold, but 700,000 fewer cars being made in the first quarter of this year by Ford alone. So we're talking about a massive impact across the spectrum. And there's a number of reasons for this, right? So when we talk about semiconductors, you have to understand, and viewers have to understand, that this is kind of the base technology for most consumer electronics, right? Everything is being run on semiconductors. And so when you're making laptops and you're making tablets and you're making all kinds of consumer electronics, they require these semiconductor chips, just as automobiles require them for the actual function of the automobile, as well as all of the kind of perks that come with that automobile. If you have screens inside of it, if you have entertainment systems, they need those chips. So you have a combination, kind of a confluence of factors here that are affecting this shortage. You have a lot of folks who want these chips. You had a large number of people during the 2020 pandemic who started buying consumer electronics at a higher rate than was expected. So that's kind of driving up the need for it. And last year in 2020, we saw more people buying automobiles than had been expected. So at the same time that supply chains slowed down, we also saw a surge in people buying. So all of that kind of combines to create a confluence of factors that, along with the Trump trade war, has really had a huge impact.
Yeah, I also heard that the blockade at the Suez Canal with that shipping container tanker was also part of the problem, that things aren't getting to where it needs to go soon enough, including semiconductors. But you touched on this a moment ago, Ben. It's not just the auto workers being impacted here, right? You mentioned laptops. There are reports that even little kids are being impacted because the schools can't get the laptops to provide to the kids to do at-home learning.
Right, exactly. And so something to keep in mind, when people hear this, they're going to immediately say, well, then why don't factories in China, why don't factories in Taiwan and you know, all around the world just produce more semiconductor chips? And one thing you have to understand is it's a part of that chip, something called the wafer, which is the little, you know, kind of frayed piece that the semiconductor chip sits down on top of in order to be inserted into an electronic. That wafer has a 26-week lag time in terms of the time you begin producing it until it is finished and ready to be used. 26 weeks. How long is that? That's what, 6 months, right? So you have a 6-month lag time from the time you begin creating those wafers until they are ready. So that's one of the things that is slowing down this process. It's not like you can go in tomorrow and say, hey guys, we were going to make 180,000 chips. Let's move that up to 360,000. Let's do that tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. So you do have a slowdown in terms of the supply chain as a result of coronavirus. But you also have just a general natural lag time associated with this. And you have certain companies, Chinese companies, that the United States under the Trump administration said can no longer sell these chips to the United States. And that creates a whole other backlash as well, because now you're taking an already limited supply of something and you're making it even more limited.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a lot of important things there, that this isn't just a demand crisis, but there is this backlog because I didn't realize it took that long. That's 6 months. Not to mention that a lot of those places in China, in Asia, were also shut down because of the coronavirus. Yes. So you double all that, and it's just impacting all over the world. Lastly, Ben, what is the outlook for consumer electronics throughout the rest of this year? Given the demand for electronic devices have jumped, so many people are working from home, people are buying the Xbox, PlayStation, all that stuff. What's that look like for the regular Joe?
Yeah, well, it's already slowed down. If we talk about consumer electronics and gaming systems, there has already been a slowdown in terms of the number of those consoles and laptops that are even being created at all right now. And as I mentioned, in the United States, we have a particularly interesting situation because you have SMIC, which is the Chinese semiconductor company that the Trump administration put sanctions on, said you can't buy from them, right? And so a lot of the orders that normally would have gone to them have now shifted to Taiwan. Well, the Taiwan company that creates so many of these semiconductors says, we just don't have the supply. We're way behind, months and months behind. So what we're going to see is a slowdown of those actual consumer products getting to the shelves. There'll be fewer of them on the shelves to begin with, and it's going to take some time to catch up with that lag in the first place. But again, this isn't a matter of weeks. So when we talk about something like the Suez Canal, that's something you can resolve in a matter of weeks and get it back on track. When you're talking about a 6-month lag time, or you're talking about possibly a year's lag time, you're going to see a significant slowdown at the same time that you have an increased number of people wanting to purchase those items. So in a normal year, non-pandemic year, you might sell far fewer laptops, far fewer gaming consoles, far fewer automobiles. All of a sudden, people want to buy all those items because they're bored and they're stuck at home. So you want to buy those, and so you have a limited number kind of in the stock supply on the shelf, and you have a limited supply in terms of the supply chain. So all of it's going to slow everything down for at least the next 18 months to 2 years.
18 months. Christmas is going to look rough this year, Ben, 2021.
Order early.
There you go. Ben Swan, thank you so much for weighing in.
You got it.